everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. We got us a big treat today. I mean, we not only have a very knowledgeable man about, the energy exploitation. Sorry, I had a little bit of Oklahoma in me and a little bit of Texan. I've got Ronald Stein stopping by the podcast today. And for our podcast listeners, I'm holding up his book. It is absolutely phenomenal. Ronald, thank you for stopping by. And your authoring of energy is fantastic. I'm looking forward to having a discussion with you.
Thank you, Stu. Same here.
I'll tell you, just as a little side note, I also saw your article that we'll be covering. Unsold electric cars may be signaling a death spiral for the auto industry. We'll cover that here in a little bit. Okay. While we were talking just a second ago, Ronald, helping citizens understand the environmental and humanity abuses that support clean energy. You hit almost all of my hot buttons in your book. What prompted you to start getting into this discussion of energy literacy, as you say?
Well, my co-author, Todd, and I, we had a lot of discussions, and it was really aggravating the fact that all the exotic minerals and metals to make EV batteries, to make wind turbines, and make solar panels were coming from developing countries that have no environmental controls, no labor controls, and they're exploiting people with yellow, brown, and black skin, and a environmental degradation. Right. Over there is okay because we can't see it, but it was really aggravating. And after writing the book, and now the big push for EVs,
right,
Lou, I have made a personal decision. I will not buy an EV for ethical reasons.
Right.
Because after writing the book, I know where the lithium and the cobalt is coming from. And I'm not willing to financially support that. On the other hand, the government is. They provide incentives, tax breaks. They're basically providing financial incentives for these foreign countries, developing countries, to continue exploiting people and destroying their landscape. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's unethical, immoral, but they're so focused on getting down to, lower emissions, they're doing anything. And like I said, I think it's unethical and immoral for the government to even think about doing that.
Your book talked about cobalt. And in cobalt, specifically in the areas that it's being mined, you had 3- and 4-year-old kids that you were talking about working for $2.50. And you also bring up that there are, I believe, 6 billion people in the world that are working for less, is it 8 billion, for less than $10 a day. So, I mean, we are looking at the middle class going away because of the way that this is done. And then the poor are going to get poorer and the rich are going to get richer.
Exactly. When Todd and I put together and wrote this book, it was just atrocious what's going on over there. And you're right, 80% of the world, now there's 8 billion people in the world, and 80%, which is more than 6 billion, you're right, they're living on less than $10 a day. And the cover photo, we had a lot of discussion. That cover photo is taken in Africa with a military guy with an Uzi overseeing a family, young and old, mining for this stuff by hand.
Right.
And that's what we're encouraging with this green movement. I mean, if they had labor laws over there and had environmental labor laws over there, I'd be fine. But that would drive up the cost of EVs. EVs are already out of sight as it is. And so, like I say, getting cheap labor and cheap materials allows it to put together, a battery. And, the Tesla battery, it's a 1,000-pound battery.
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
And how many tons of material needs to be excavated in order just to get the battery? I
For the
mean,
different, for the lithium and the cobalt, different metals, it's estimated you have to move about 500,000 tons of earth to
right.
get the materials to make one battery.
And you mentioned recycling in the book. Unbelievable. Windmills are not recyclable. The blades, you talk about the amount of steel that goes into it. And I have put a call out to folks. All my crayon math, I went to Oklahoma State University. So my crayon math is I cannot say that wind farms are past 8 years. And a way I say that is fiscally responsible past 8 years, because you eliminate the tax credits, you have the increased costs of maintenance, and so you eliminate that out. And the meantime between failure on all the turbines is right in that 8 year mark. So there's really no reason to put them in because they're carbon net zero after 10.
Well, that's another thing that aggravates me is the environmentalist, just like the military is silent. They don't want to ask an embarrassing question to their boss, the president. The environmentalists are silent because there's
Right.
right now it's unproven if there's any economical way to recycle the batteries, the wind turbines,
Right.
the solar panels, and the environmentalists are silent. I
I
mean,
don't get it.
Australia, they got piles and piles of toxic waste dumps of these turbines, and they're
Right.
huge. They're
It,
unbelievably huge. It's just like when you watch the space shuttle launch, it's on
yes.
TV, the
Yep.
camera's here, and the space shuttle is only 12 inches high because the camera is, 5 miles away. Well, the wind turbines don't look very big because the photograph is taken a long way away. But these
Right.
blades, each blade is getting to be the length of a football field.
Isn't that nuts?
And Stu, that is huge. And like I say,
Yep.
their mechanical equipment, they got 10 to 20 years of life. And after that, they're falling apart. And
Well,
then they only make intermittent electricity. Can you run a hospital on wind turbines or solar panels?
and the grid, Meredith Angwin was phenomenal on her discussion. I love Meredith. I think she's a national treasure. And the grid, shorting the grid was her book. And I really learned a lot. Like in Texas, they're producing a lot of solar and wind, but it took $3.5 billion to get the wind on a transmission line in order to get it to East Texas. It does not make sense.
No, it doesn't. It's atrocious. And then the other thing, wind and solar, they get a lot of subsidies, but they get subsidies based on nameplate rating. And they never produce
Rating.
nameplate
Tell me what
rating.
nameplate rating is. That on
I
the
mean,
wind turbine
well,
activity?
yeah, if you have, like so many megawatts of power you're going to
Got it.
produce,
Yes.
nameplate rating, and they do occasionally if the wind's really blowing, but most of the time they're not working. A coal-fired power plant, a natural gas power plant, they'll produce about 98% of their nameplate rating annually.
Right.
They're down for maintenance occasionally, but wind and solar, they're down most of the time because of
Right.
weather. And we just don't get electricity. And it turns out the reason electricity rates are going up, Germany was the first country to go green. They now got the highest electricity rates in the world.
Yep.
And California were right behind them. Our rates, I
Right.
think, are the highest in the country. And it's crazy. We're basically building a redundant electrical generating system,
Right.
but you need continuous uninterruptible electricity.
Right.
So the backup is wind and solar and nuclear.
Right.
And so you're basically just building these wind turbines, solar panels as a showpiece because you can't rely on them.
No, and I loved your chapter on California and Germany, and when you start talking about the high cost of energy, it's the printing of the money. It's the inflation that printing the money goes for. And Germany really shot themselves in the foot by getting dependent on Russian natural gas. Oops.
Yeah, everybody that's quote gone green is dependent on somebody else. You take California. California, we got the most temperate climate in the country. It's
Right.
never too hot, it's never too cold. And of all the EVs in the entire country,
Right.
40% of them are here in California. Now, Stu, that's an easy calculation. The other
Right.
60% are divided among the other 49 states.
Right.
Well, that's like 1% per state.
You mentioned in your book that there's no charging stations in the other 49 states.
Well, if you only have a couple EVs, it doesn't no justification to put a charging station in. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. And in California, we have all these EVs.
Right.
And we can't generate enough electricity. California imports more electricity than other state in the country.
Isn't that
We
nuts?
import like 30% of our electricity comes from adjoining states.
In your
And then a couple of weeks ago, we had a hot day.
Yep.
What does Newsom say? Don't charge your EV.
Let me ask you this. They're wanting to make, excuse me, they're wanting to make the EVs bi-directional on that so they can pull power off the car into the grid. But doesn't that add like $5,000 to a car in order to hook it to your house for bi-directional or something? I don't know about you, but I can't afford that.
Well, there's not enough electricity in that system. You know, it was interesting with all the people talking about grid stability and the concern about the grid can't handle it. The UK, they came up with the greatest solution.
Okay.
Last year in June, by law, all chargers, home chargers, chargers to work, are programmed not to work 9 hours a day. During peak load requirements, you cannot charge your vehicle. That's given. And secondly, and most importantly, Stu, those chargers are on a separate meter. They're going to be charged separately, higher rates, because the UK knows if they've got to rebuild the grid, who's going to pay for it? The EV users. And if the grid really gets in trouble, they'll just turn that circuit off. Instead of not operating 9 hours a day, it may not operate for days.
That's coming to a state near you.
Well, exactly. You know, I'm here in beautiful California, and
Right.
don't ask me when I'm leaving. So, but you know, here in California, we have 400,000 miles of roadway, all these freeways, everything, and road taxes accumulate $8 billion to help maintain those roads. Now, Newsom wants to go all electric. Well, if we go to all electric vehicles, the $8 billion in fuel taxes is going to go to
Nothing.
zero.
Right.
So now we have heavier vehicles using our 400,000 miles of roadway,
Road damage.
paying nothing.
Wow.
So there's two things coming up. The VMT, the
Right.
vehicle mileage tax, has been talked about for years. You know how to implement that. Basically, whoever uses the road pays for the road.
Right.
And like I say, California might implement what the UK did, put in separate meters. And like I say, the electric rates are going to go skyrocketing because someone's got to pick up that $8 billion loss of income to the state.
Now, there's a couple things in your article. It was dated August 1st, and again, I'm a Ronald fan over here. You know, so you know if you ever run for president, I'll be over here going yay. So one of the things was the recycling, and I just interviewed the president of Fry Battery, a storage company out of Norway. I interviewed the CEO last year. My renewable hot button is recyclable. And Fry Battery is the only one that has a recyclable battery for the gigabyte plants. So if the batteries are not recyclable, how can they truly be a sustainable resource?
Well, And the answer to your question is really another question. There's not enough lithium and cobalt in the world to build the EV batteries
Right.
to have an EV population that they want. And once you run out of lithium and cobalt, you're stuck in the mud. Now you have all these EVs.
Right. Why? I love the idea of the hybrid. And I noticed in your book also that it was the second cars. You always say that the second cars are the EVs, and people that have the money buy the EVs, and then they got a big Dodge truck sitting out there, or a Ford truck, or, they got a big town car or something that they can drive around. And then everybody goes, I got me an EV. I wouldn't have an EV because of what you just said, the other things coming back around. But I like the idea of hybrids. Why doesn't that make sense that we get 60 miles per gallon and about a fourth of the battery use? What are your thoughts on that?
As an engineer, I thought the hybrid was the greatest invention ever.
Yeah.
You double your gas mileage, and you buy us a couple hundred years to develop battery technology.
Right.
But the auto industries have been mandated to eliminate them. Let me explain. The auto industries have mandated to get their emissions down for their entire fleet. They have to average it out for the entire fleet. And the only way you can get down that low, they have to eliminate the gasoline engine in the hybrid. And so all the automobile manufacturers, you're going to see a couple hybrids because they can do it within their fleet. But most automobile manufacturers are 100% all in, EVs or nothing.
Well, you talk about it in the article that it could be the death of the auto industry. And I could see why, because Toyota was, I believe, I have to fact check myself, which is, my wife does that all the time. No, you're an idiot. Okay. But Toyota did two things, and that is they were really not going after the EV market until just recently. And it's because they didn't feel that there was any profit. And Ford is losing $20,000 to $60,000 per car when they sell one. How can you be sustainable?
Well, you can't, but by law, they're mandated to do this. And, the EPA is trying to increase the mileage requirements, which is, to a number that you can't get out of a gasoline engine. So yeah, I mean, all the regulations are against them, and it takes them like 10 to 20 years to gear up to make a different widget.
Right.
And now they're going to be making a widget that most people can't afford. The elites are still buying them, and they'll still continue to buy them, but the working class, no. You're related to, take home ownership. I read an article that 40% of homeowners are house poor. They're going to make their payment. Well, more likely they're not going to be buying an EV because they don't have that flexibility. And apartment dwellers, I saw a number that like 70% of people living in apartments, can't afford a house.
Right.
Well, more likely they can't afford an EV either.
Right.
And so
it's. I am a little old school. I'm looking for the article that I just read. I think it was a Cadillac that was an EV. Oh, here it is. GM confirms Cadillac Celestiq starting at $340K. Holy smokes. Boy, I can afford that. I don't know. Good grief.
So if you got time, I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay.
I've always driven a sedan, and I had a Mercedes E350 four-door sedan, and it was getting up in mileage. And so, so I'm up in age. I started to trade it in. So I decided to lease an SL 450 convertible Mercedes.
Nice.
An old fart like me. And so anyhow, I'm driving this, two-door Mercedes, and it's a two-door, and it's hard to get into, it's hard to get out of. And after a year, I says, damn, I got to go back to a sedan. And so I qualify. Ethically, I wouldn't buy an EV, but I qualify as an EV owner. So I went online and I priced out the E350 in an E version.
Right.
And it stuck it out at 110. $110,000.
Yeah.
I says, holy crap, So I looked at the E350 and the gas version. It was
Yep.
50,000 less. And so I being an engineer, I get my pencil out. If I keep my SL for 3 years,
Right.
with the mileage I get and the cost of fuel here in California, over 3 years, I'd spend $5,000. So I was talking to my personal trainer. I said, Tony, should I spend an extra 50,000 so I could save 5,000? He said, Ron, you buy that EV, I'm going to kick your butt.
But yeah, I applaud you in your decision. I mean, I drive old cars, and it's because I'm too cheap. I just don't care. I mean, I get a car broken in, and I just traded out my 1999 Ford pickup a while ago. It was finally worn out, and I had 250,000 miles on it, and I kind of like that truck. I get it broken in at about
just broken in.
and I again, I'm just not a big, got to have me a new car. And why go spend all that money? Now a hybrid, I'm starting to get a little interested in.
Yeah. I'd be interested in the hybrid. But here in California, you drive the streets here and you see, the people that don't have a house are parked on the street, and the streets are just jammed. All these cars. I'm just trying to visualize, geez, if these are EVs, how are they going to charge them? And if you have extension cords laying all over the street, well, that's the first thing people are going to steal, because they'll steal it and cash in the copper. And so it's just too inconvenient. And a car is a means of transportation. You don't want to think about it. Do I have enough energy in there charged? And then, God forbid, we had a situation happen yesterday. One of the freeways that connects north and south, they had a tanker caught fire, and people were caught. They were stuck in traffic for 5 hours. And if you're in traffic for 5 hours, you'd like, during the day, you'd like your air conditioning running. Well, Stu, the air conditioner runs off the battery.
And it drains the battery.
So no, it's just too inconvenient. And if you're out in the middle of nowhere and get stuck, then you're screwing up everybody else behind you.
See, I couldn't have one from the standpoint that as soon as you put a trailer on it, it just, you cut your mileage in half, and it would not tow my boat. So, you sit.
Oh yeah, the bigger the vehicle, and again, most EVs are sedans, but statistically, most people are buying, I'll use the word, light trucks, SUVs, that type of thing. They're bigger vehicles, and not the small sedans. Now, Biden is really excited about the Ford 150.
Right.
Well, its battery, I think, is upwards of 1,500 pounds.
That's a lot.
Now, the Hummer has an EV version.
Right.
You know what the battery weighs? 5,000.
7,000. How much?
5,000.
Whoa!
It's a tank.
Can you?
You're right. The bigger the load, the bigger the battery. And if you want to tow a boat, you need a bigger battery.
Now, let me ask this, because the lifespan of a battery, I believe you talked about it in your book as well, is 100,000 miles or 8 years or something like that. And I've got some friends that are buying the EVs, and they ain't getting that kind of length out of it. And when you have to buy a whole new battery pack, it's $24,000.
Right. And it's interesting, because when you take a look at EV sales, well, take a look at automobile sales. Automobile sales, pick a number, 25% are usually new, 75% are used.
Right.
That's the normal annual market for vehicles.
Right.
There is no used car market for EVs.
Is it because of the big batteries that you got to buy again after?
It's the same type thing, because if you buy a used EV, the lifespan of that battery is a lot less than the original owner had.
Right.
And the cost to replace it is, as you mentioned, humongous. And so, it'd be cheaper to buy an old gasoline car.
Right. And let me ask this. The Biden administration. Okay, the Biden administration, I don't get in a lot of ways because that we heard this big thing going on just a little while ago with they're going after the gas stoves.
Right.
I'm going right because they want the electric stove so they can shut it off, just like you mentioned when you have two different ones in the UK. They now put out saying they want to go after the ceiling fans. That was day before yesterday. What is up with them? How, and is California getting that way where they're wanting to control 100% of the electricity?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. The confusion part is the fact that our leaders are mesmerized with the fact that renewable energy, and I use that word, renewable energy, is going to replace
Right.
fossil fuels. But renewables only generate electricity. Wind turbines generate electricity.
Right.
Solar panels generate electricity. EV batteries store electricity. But
Right.
wind turbines manufacture nothing for society. Solar panels manufacture nothing for society.
Wow.
In fact, you go back to the 1900s, the health department didn't exist before. The medical industry didn't exist before 1900 because they had no products.
Right.
But today we have a product shortage problem.
Right.
That's the thing that they don't recognize, that wind and solar only generate electricity. They manufacture nothing. Now, if they really want to get rid of all the fossil fuels,
right.
I'm glad you're sitting down, because we're going to get rid of wind turbines and we're going to get rid of solar panels and we'll get rid of EVs, because all of the materials needed to make wind turbines, solar panels, and EV batteries, EV vehicles, is made with fossil fuels.
Right.
Now you take Joe Biden. He's flying around on a 400-ton airplane, 100% made with fossil fuels. All the electronics made with fossil fuels, powered by aviation fuel, made from fossil fuels. And he's screaming in the microphone, "We're going to get rid of fossil fuels." Is there a disconnect here? I mean, you can't. Think about it. Everything that needs electricity is made with fossil fuels. Your iPhone, electricity can charge it, but electricity can't make it.
Exactly.
Take the defibrillator in the hospital. Electricity can make it work, but it can't make the defibrillator.
You got to have the plastic.
Take a look in your house, in the hospital, your friends, neighbors, try to identify something, anything that was not made with fossil fuels.
I'm dead meat because I've got 10 monitors right here. I've
got
honestly, I've got a whole wall of monitors, and I've got 2 Linux servers, and I got fossil fuel all over the place here.
Everybody does. And it's just amazing that there's a disconnect, and the press never questions the stupidity. Hey, I'm all for getting, putting wind turbines in, but what are they going to do? All they do is generate electricity.
Right.
And everything needs electricity is made with fossil fuels.
I love the way you phrase that, Ronald. That is absolutely outstanding. In your book, also, you talk about, I believe it's 60, I'm going to throw the number out, 60,000 power plants around the world. And China and Japan, I'm trying to remember the numbers you had in there. They're adding another 300 right now, I believe, or something, a couple a week. It's
China and India, they're building about 1 coal-fired power plant a week. And it's interesting, the world is building nuclear. Sweden, they threw the monkey wrench in the pot. They said, we're done with this renewable stuff. We need continuous electricity, uninterruptible electricity, emission-free electricity. We're going nuclear, and basically, the hell with renewables, because renewables have a limitation, and they have a short lifespan. How do you recycle the stuff?
Right.
And then you're decimating the landscape that they're taking.
Right.
Everybody's all excited about offshore wind, but offshore wind only affects the coastal cities. What about Nebraska? They're not going to benefit from
No.
offshore wind.
And killing the whales. You know, oil and gas saved it the first time, you know, saved the whales the first time. And then Greenpeace, I got to interview Patrick Patrick, who was one of the founders of Greenpeace. And I didn't realize that they had saved the whales from the Japanese whaling and everything. So Greenpeace really did a great job before they went a little bit weird on Greenpeace. They saved them the second time. So maybe oil and gas can save the whales the third time.
Well, it's interesting. Oil and gas industry that's a tough industry. You know, no one likes them, no one trusts them. And
rightfully so. They were bad for a while.
Right.
I'll give them that.
Right. But I like my position. I mean, I grew up, you know, working with a engineering firm that basically designed and built refineries around the world. So
Nice.
I learned the industry, and now I'm in a position, I'm almost the private business spokesperson for the industry.
Nice.
Because I can say what they want to say that they can't say. I mean, I could say, you know, Biden and Newsom are crazy. They can't say it. I can say it. But like I said, there's this unanswered questions. And,
yes,
you know, when I give a presentation on energy, I don't like to give a presentation. I like to do a fireside chat.
right.
Now, most people are embarrassed to ask an intelligent question on energy. So I'll basically give the moderator, I'll give the audience 50 open-ended questions.
Right.
Hand it out. And so if they want to talk about EVs or wind or solar or nuclear or, you know, whatever, but I want to talk about the subject they want to hear about.
Right.
And so if I give them the written question, they can stand up and ask an intelligent question, or, you know, they can modify whatever, but it basically stimulates the conversation. But again, I need to have people talk about this at the dinner table, because you got to ask, you know, they want to get rid of, you know, stoves, and they want to get rid of this and that. What's the repercussion?
You bring up some other great numbers in the book. Have I proved that I read the book? By the way,
yes. You passed the quiz.
You also mentioned in there that in the numbers for folks that die from cooking and just using natural gas or anything else. And it is amazing that people think that, oh, cook from wood or cook from cow dung or cook from those other things. And reading your stats, it kills a lot of people.
Oh yeah, it's huge. And you're right. You know, they can't put enough food on the table, and they've got no air conditioning, and yeah, they burn cow dung, you know, for energy. And yeah, the environment is just horrendous, you know, for those people. And they haven't joined the Industrial Revolution. And
right.
Because we're separating the economies, the wealthy and the less wealthy, that they may never join the Industrial Revolution.
But let me ask this, because Africa drives me nuts. Why are the richer countries trying to shove a bad energy policy that has not worked for California or Germany on them, charge them higher interest rates, and then tell them they have to go to renewables when they've got natural gas and they've got everything there? Why?
Everybody's so focused on emissions, they want to get down low. In fact, I use the term leakage. Leakage, because in California, we're the most environmentally controlled state in the world.
Right.
If you want to build anything that's going to be an emission generator, you want to build it in California.
Right.
To get the least emission. But if you say, well, don't build it here, build it there.
Right.
Well, now you're saying, you know, you can basically have all the emissions you want over there.
Right.
But we're going to keep California clean. And so we've got a lot of laws here on environmental laws. And they basically say you really can't leak that responsibility somewhere else. But we do it all the time.
Right. But California buys 70% of the oil from Ecuador and the rest of the places that China pumps out of the rainforest. They import 70% of that. A little hypocrisy going on, isn't it?
California, back in 95, I think between California oil production and Alaska imports, we were 95% self-sufficient. Since that time, all
What
the
year was that,
governors,
Ronald?
95.
95. Wow.
We imported 5% from all these foreign countries, OPEC, et cetera. And all the governors we've had since that time says reduce oil production, reduce oil production. So Lou, today that 5% has grown to more than 60%.
Wow.
We're the fourth largest economy in the world in California. And we import 60% of the oil demands for that economy.
Right.
We're a national security risk for the entire country.
Absolutely.
And what does our governor want to do? He wants to reduce in-state production to increase imports. Now, here's another interesting statistic. You talk about leakage.
Yeah.
We import all this oil. And now the oil tankers that come to California from OPEC, and Venezuela, et cetera, they use a low-grade fuel, which emits tremendous emission. And the emissions from oil tankers, annual emissions from oil tankers, the total annual emissions from tankers is double the entire mobile fleet of California.
Holy smokes.
Now that's okay, because you have to understand, Newsom only breathes California air. If it's outside of California, perimeters, he doesn't breathe that. That's okay. He doesn't count that.
But then, the solar thing is driving me nuts, because there are several places where the U.S. is dumping all their solar panels. And if it cannot be recycled, I'm not a happy camper. Like Fry Battery out of Norway, they've designed their energy storage to be recyclable. Okay, I'm in. Okay, if your wind farm blades don't need tax subsidies, if you can recycle those blades, let's talk. But this is driving me nuts.
Well, as I mentioned, that's the thing that really aggravates me, the silence of the environmentalists. Because if you're going to build a mine, if you're going to build a refinery, if you're going to build a nuclear site, you have to prove before you put a shovel in the ground how you're going to reclaim the land back to its pristine condition.
Right.
Recycling and whatever. But they're so focused on getting rid of fossil fuels, and we're going to go to renewables, even though it's generating electricity. They're not thinking about it. They don't even talk about it.
They don't.
But these blades, the solar panels, your battery and your flashlight, when it conks out, I know what you do. You probably do the same thing as me. I throw it in the trash can. Well, you're going to need 6 buddies to get that 1,000-pound battery in the trash can from your EV.
I apologize, Ron. I'm sitting here kind of thinking about this, but every time you said leakage, I thought of our president. I had to keep pulling my mind back into the discussion. My apologies.
There is an association.
But we sit back and we talk about Secretary Granholm and their problems that they have with having the permits and the problems. Before 2 years ago, they had 8,000 renewable projects that they were trying to get on. Now it's up to 20,000+ that are waiting for permits to get attached to the grid. And then the grid won't work.
Well, you also have to take a look at the amount of growing projects that are being rejected. The NIMBYs, the not in my backyard. I think it's upward between solar and wind. I think there's over 500 have been rejected. They're not moving forward because people don't want those in their backyard. Making noise. They're ugly, and
was it Senator Kennedy years ago? He didn't want that off of his coast. I remember that he shut it down, and everyone was like, that's terrible. He's like, I don't want to look at it.
Right. And like you say, because you need so much, and again, it's only electricity.
Right. Now, Siemens, I think it was last year, lost $2 trillion. I mean, it's some number. I have to go fact check myself, but it was some ungodly number. They lost that much. Maybe it was 2 billion. Anyway, they lost that, and they're the world's largest manufacturer of wind turbines. You can't make these things and make any money.
If you're subsidized, you can.
I stand corrected, Ronald. I am so sorry. So
well, the government's hoping to pay for it.
There you go. Now I got a question. Your book is phenomenal, and I keep showing this to all my podcast listeners. How do we get to the next level? Education is got to be the only way. Having discussions is all important. How are you envisioning people taking it to the next level? What do we got to do to solve the energy crisis?
Well, you're right. It's got to be a discussion because, when Biden and Newsom says we're jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, someone's got to ask a question, why, what's your backup plan, but it definitely has to be a discussion. Now, the exciting thing is I do have a passion for energy literacy, and I'm seeing more and more articles written by many different folks
Right.
on the same subjects I'm talking about, trying to bring some logic into this because,
right.
You just can't get rid of gas stoves.
No.
There's repercussions, and there's pros and cons, and everybody's only looking at reducing emissions, and they just see one solution: get rid of oil and put up a wind turbine. Well, there's a lot of questions that have to be asked, and right now they're not being asked. And I know, all the people that have the microphone, they speak into the microphone, and it's really depressing that the press transcribes it. They don't question it.
Right.
They just transcribe it. And, the fact our military is not asking the president, how are we going to run our military without, the products we have. I mean, you won't be able to make the ammunition. Electricity doesn't make ammunition. And so it's, like you said, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and that's got to
your education of your book. And I feel like I'm a cheerleader over here for your book. You and Todd just did a great job on it because the way that it is woven around with the stats, with the issues, you did a great job. And in the front of it, and I'm sorry for complimenting you, but too bad. In the front of it, you nailed out everything that you were going to do in the whole book. And there's a lot of books that are out there that don't do that. And this is lots of facts, lots of data, and we'll have it in the show notes there as well too.
Well, so you're not the only cheerleader because, as you know, the book was nominated for Pulitzer Prize. And like I say, it does bring up information that the public should be aware of.
Yes.
In reading the papers, because, like I say, I'm just appalled by the press not willing to ask questions.
Right.
And I see these presidential debates coming up in the near future. These questions should be asked of the candidates.
Absolutely. And
I mean, the military won't ask them. How do you ask a president, how are you going to run the military? Now, I'll say one thing. The greatest thing about getting rid of fossil fuels,
right,
you would ground Air Force One.
Well, there's Air Force One, there's Air Force Two, there's the 5 C5s that have to go with that. So everybody says you're flying around on Air Force One. There's actually another 15 airplanes that fly along to bring the helicopters, to bring the Beast, to bring all these other things along. So
plus the motorcade of 20 vehicles.
And one C5 will only hold like 4 of them, or I'm kidding. No, it's like horrible. Well, I'll tell you what, Ronald, I would love to visit with you again in the future. And if you ever have any other books coming out or you want to spread the word around, just reach out and I want to have you back at any time on the podcast. So thank you.
Fantastic. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon, Ronald.
Okay, take care.